All right, I think we are live here. All right, I think we're good. Seeing some drop frames tonight, but hopefully it isn't too crazy. We won't be looking at too many moving images. Today we're focusing on um, the acronym list from the CompTIA. So this is the list of acronyms on the 601 that would show up on the exams. Uh, So candidates are encouraged to review the complete list and attain a working knowledge of all listed acronyms as part of a comprehensive exam preparation program. So, um, um, main piece here today is we're just learning about these acronyms and learning about their definitions, so that we could answer questions better later when we go back to our Inky deck or um, do the Professor Measure exams. So. Um, so let's focus on uh, this left-hand side today, and then we'll just kind of go all the way down the left-hand side, and then come back up. Uh, so first one we got here is 3DS, um, and 3DS. Sorry, 3DES is Triple Data Encryption Standard. Um, okay, so uh, nice and easy to remember from an acronym standpoint, three of something, right? Data encryption standard. Uh, so we'll we'll use that little trick to remember this one. Next one, AAA. Um, this one is um, this one's used a lot, and I believe uh, the cloud for doing integrity. I know there's also an I in front of some of these, but AAA stands for authentication, authorization, and accounting. Next one, ABAC. Um, um, this one stands for attribute based access control. Um, we did have a couple of questions on this from uh, previous questions. I think attribute access control was related to um, well, attributes, but pieces in a system that I guess I can't think of a good example. This might be one we need to review and look back on, because I don't exactly remember what the an example of this attribute based section was. But let's move on. ACL access control list. This the way I remember this one is just through Linux, the Linux space. ACLs are used to define permissions for directories, who can access what group has read and write permissions. Um, um, yeah, so ACL, AD, Active Directory. I use Azure AD to kind of remember this. Active Directory is a centralized database where things like role-based access control exists, where people get roles, and then you could separate duties uh, via those roles and create and allow for least privilege to be active in the company. Various things that AD can do is very powerful. AES encryption, advanced encryption standard. There's various forms of this, like the one below it, AES 256. So this is another uh, encryption standard. Um, and then AH, we did have a question on this from our previous test questions. The authentication header is uh, is is used in scenarios where there are, well, trying to remember. I think it's a web-based scenario, but I can't remember. This one we'll definitely have to review on. We did have a question on it prior, but I don't exactly remember uh, the example that was given. AI, artificial intelligence, uh, which is huge right now. At the time of the 601 creation, I don't think this was as popular, but AI is definitely a huge factor in cybersecurity now. Um, um, AI ops, AI security, um, in development and all the IT space, and it's definitely a big lift and shift for a lot of companies. And it's in all honesty, it's leaning out with a lot of companies as well. So, uh, the skill sets needed now are a lot different than 2 years ago or even a year ago. So AI um, a huge disruptor to the IT industry. AIS. So this one is automated indicator sharing. I don't remember this one. I don't think I had a question on this one yet. So this one we'll have to remember and focus on. ALE, annualized loss expectancy. So there were a few questions that I kind of ran through with this one. Essentially, the concept is that if you're doing like you're running a calculation to figure out how much of something you can lose or expect to lose based on a given scenario, like there's a fire or disaster. Um, what's your loss expectancy, and then uh, that usually is done through a calculation or a formula. AP access point. Um, access points uh, uh, are networking devices that are attached to either switches or enterprise routers. Um, they act as a a point of access for wireless devices in a business, and usually are kind of spread out evenly throughout a building to ensure the entire building is encompassed in internet access and there's no dead spots. Hopefully, that's how you get it set up, but it's never ideal. It depends on the building's blueprints, and yeah, access points can be set up in various ways or modes. They can act as repeaters. They can act as routers. They can act as just a point of access. Uh, you can even connect an Ethernet cable to them. Some of them are powered over Ethernet using PoE or power over Ethernet, but some of them require um, um, their own power source. Um, so yeah, access points are huge in the networking space, huge for businesses, IT businesses, um, and can be configured and remotely managed by a network admin. Um, API, um, application programming interface. So yeah, the two big ones here are REST API and SOAP API. Um, REST is the more popular variant, but SOAP is a close leader or a close follower. So yeah, APIs are used to talk with to grab information from the back end of a web server or a system. So very nice from a software development standpoint, from a front end, so that you can just grab information and then manipulate it and produce. visualize it for the customers on the website or the front end of the application. So used heavily in software development. Uh, APT, advanced persistent threat. So in an APT or advanced persistent threat um, usually is a threat that is looming kind of at all times. They're very hard to spot. Usually, uh, very well experienced threat actors usually fall under this, where they uh, will will um, will traverse their way through a network or systems and just kind of stay there for a while uh, without too much or little to no detection from the IPS or IDS systems. Um, and yeah, they're looming threats. Hard to detect, but um, that's why you have security engineers that actively look for stuff like that. ARO, annualized rate of occurrence. Um, this is this ties in with ALE. Uh, 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 again, more of a mathematical formula of again, what's the likelihood of something coming, or sorry, the likelihood of something occurring. Again, rate of occurrence annualizes for the year, um, and based on the type of question you could be asked, what would you use in this scenario, ARO or ALE? So, yeah, ARP, address resolution protocol. Um, this one didn't get too many questions on this one, but this one is related to where an address kind of resolves to or goes to. Uh, the protocol portion, not too familiar with, but yeah, this one is definitely one I'll want to read up on and try to think of examples for. Um, but an address resolving is, you know, typically there's a, a server running and then there's a client connected to that server and you get the resolution to that server. But there could be more to that, or I could just be wrong. Right, so we'll do some more reading on this one. Um, ASLR, address space layout randomization. Um, this one is very new to me. I have not seen a question on this one before. I don't even have an example or a definition of what that could be. Uh, randomizing a address, an IP address. That's my best guess. I wouldn't know how that would be help or be important, but yeah, we'll need to read up on that one. ASP, active server pages. So actually, Microsoft does have a .NET version of this called ASP. I believe it's .NET, and essentially, um, they were very popular back in the day. Uh, active server pages were uh, very similar to web pages nowadays. Um, and Microsoft had their own system set up uh, for this. But ASPs themselves are relatively old. Um, still used today, but I don't see active usage of ASPs. Attack. Um, um, Usually, this term is followed by MITRE, right? There's a framework called MITRE ATT&CK, right? Um, but the attack here stands for adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge body. Yeah, what I remember this as is the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and it's a body of knowledge of various attack techniques and kind of what kind of tactics you would take from a pen testing perspective, right? AUP, acceptable use policy. These are kind of everywhere. Um, Anytime you go and uh, kind of buy a product, you're agreeing to an AUP. Um, um, Companies themselves have policies within the company for their employees on what they can and can't do with company data, can or can and cannot do um, um, in their roles. So, um, acceptable use policies are everywhere. Uh, Usually are done by the managerial and administrative staff, um, and are usually higher level documents. Um, AV antivirus. This one is pretty straightforward. Antiviruses are extremely popular on both the uh, end user side and enterprise side. Um, Antiviruses are monumental in their abilities to detect and prevent uh, systems from getting infected by malware or a virus or Trojans um, and various other forms of attacks. So, favorite one that I've liked in the past um, is kind of blanking out on it. Bitdefender, right? Bitdefender is nice. Kaspersky is great. I know that due to the Russian-Ukraine war, people are a little skeptic on Kaspersky's uh, data data usage policies. Um, yeah, but Bitdefender and Kaspersky are definitely notable, and of course the famous Microsoft Windows Defender, right? That's on all of the Windows machines. Another great one. Uh, yeah. Antiviruses are uh, very important to have on end user systems. Bash, uh, uh, Born Again shell. Um, um, in all honesty, I never say the full thing. Um, I honestly forgot that this word even existed in this acronym. But yeah, Bash used as a programming language in Linux to create scripts and essentially do power user or sysadmin like things on Linux systems. BCP, Business Continuity Plan. Every business has one of these, essentially just essentially indicating how the business continues to operate in the event of a disaster, and what to do when a likely disaster happens. How does the business continue to operate and run? How continuity continue, right? That's an easy way to remember. Um, BGP, Border Gateway Protocol. Haven't seen this one too often. Yeah, very little. Um, that's one I'll need to read up on. BIA, Business Impact Analysis. So this one's very actually a little similar to that BCP here, or BIA. So business impact analysis is kind of um, an analysis of if something were to happen, how bad would it impact the business, and what costs would that business occur, right? Or to, and how long would it take us to get back up and running, right? Essentially, what is the impact of the disaster, and then continuity is how do we continue running, right? So That's the way I remember it. There's probably a better way, uh, and maybe a more correct way, but yeah, let's move on. BIOS, basic input output system. So every system has a BIOS, or BIOS, however you want to pronounce it. It's a configuration area in a system where you can set up things like boot order. You can change settings on your CPU to include things like hyperthreading, uh, enable Wake on LAN or a Pixie boot off the network. Um, yeah, the BIOS is essentially the dash the controller dashboard for a motherboard, um, and the CPU attached to that board, along with all the other things attached to that board, like the fans and um, um, the amount of power that those fans get, the RAM speeds, right? Like all the PC builders enabling XNP in your BIOS. First thing you do to ensure your RAM is running at the advertised rates. Um, so yeah, BPA, Business Partnership Agreement. Um, this one I haven't seen too often, but yeah, BPA, Business Partnership Agreement, is an agreement between two businesses uh, on a project, right? Or a business agreement, or a business proposal rather, and that proposal then gets sent, and then you get approved. But I don't have a great explanation for this one. It's kind of using context clues here. BPDU Bridge Protocol Data Units. That one eludes me as well. We'll have to look up that one. BSSID Basic Service Set Identifier. Uh, so an SSID, uh, usually the easiest way I can remember is it is the name, essentially the identifiable thing that's used to set a network up. So an SSID would be directly the name of the network, right? So if we created a Wi-Fi for a household and then gave that Wi-Fi a name, the name of that Wi-Fi would be the SSID, right? So um, not not too sure about the basic part, uh, leaning towards that just being more of a simplistic form of the regular SSID, but I'm unsure. Uh, BYOD, bring your own device. So this one is a, a this this one is kind of set up for uh, corporations that don't have the budget or funding to give their employees laptops or desktops or tablets, essentially devices to uh, use with them in the business or outside of the business. So what they say is, well, we'll set up a BYOD policy where um, your device uh, um, your device will have to meet a certain criteria um, for security, like such as like encrypting your drive or having certain not having certain software installed or how the device should be used on the network, etc. But the idea is you bring your laptop, your tablet, personal, paid with your own money to work, and that's how you do your work, right? So yeah, let's move on to the next one. CA is certificate authority. So a CA is a body will uh, that you will request certificates from, right? And then they will give you those certificates. CAs are usually trusted entities. A couple examples are like Sectego, or Cloudflare. Um, um, there's various other ones. Um, yeah, but I'm most familiar with Sectico and Cloudflare. Komodo was the previous name of what Sectico was. Systemic was another one that used back in the day. Uh, but yeah, the CAs are just are trusted entities that uh, would give you a certificate that would enable SSL on your website or endpoint that requires a certificate. And usually it's a digital certificate that kind of gives you that lock icon when you do visit a website. Um, and you know, it allows a large group of people um, to trust what is on your website, if you're ever authenticating to it or doing various other things. There are free CAs like Let's Encrypt or uh, Let's Encrypt does provide you a free certificate. So yeah, CAs there's a whole rabbit hole we can get into with CAs, but yeah, CAs just act as like a validating body to uh, for various entities, websites, um, email addresses, servers, company at large, etc. Yeah, I could have been wrong about the Sectigo Komodo comment. Um, don't exactly remember if there was a transaction between Sectigo and Komodo, or if they're two separate entities. But I'm pretty sure from the reading that I did a couple years ago, Sectigo is Komodo, and Komodo's Exactigo vice versa. Um, so, yep, let's move to the next one. Uh, CAPTCHA. So this one we're probably all familiar with. Uh, type these letters out and prove you're human, right? We've seen these on websites to validate that you're not a robot. Uh, and usually the tests kind of vary. Flip this image to the correct uh, so that it's upright or in the correct position, or pick a sunflower, or type these letters in various forms. But yeah, it stands for completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. Uh, let's keep scrolling down here. Um, DER, distinguish encoding rules. That's one we haven't seen too much of. Um, I'm assuming it's a set of rules that have been validated by a body of knowledge. Um, but I could be wrong there. We'd have to read up on that one. Um, DES, data encryption standard. So DES is, well, says it in the name, a standard for data encryption. Um, can't say much else for this one. Um, a little bit more reading for this one I think would be helpful to just to give out some examples. Um, DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So your DHCP um, is something that you should know, um, 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 like how it works, right? Uh, a DHCP usually is a thing that provides IPs to hosts on your network, right? Um, and uh, it also does it for like the default gateway, for example, which would be like something like your router or your modem. Um, um, it basically manages all your IP addresses. So if your DHCP is out of whack, then you might not be able to access a certain web server because uh, the it hasn't been the IP hasn't been renewed or it's stale. Um, um, so yeah, it does the whole shebang of providing all of the IP addresses to client devices on your network. And that goes for everything. That goes from everything that's connected to your switches, your routers, uh, all the way up to your client devices like your laptop and tablets. Okay, let's move on. DHE, uh, Diffie-Hellman ephemeral. So this is a encryption uh, tactic, or sorry, uh, uh, not an encryption tactic, rather uh, a key exchange, right? Um, where two or more parties share a secret, and it can be used for exchanging data over the internet. Um, I don't have a great example for this one. Um, I was thinking email might be one, uh, or like a signed message, right? Someone signs it with their private with their uh, the signs it with their pub key and then sends it over to someone, and it's verified, like it's verified by their uh, you can tell it's them because of their pub key. I could be wrong though. Let's move on. uh DKIM or DKIM, domain keys identified mail. I have seen this term before, this acronym, but I don't have a great example for this one. um, Let's keep moving on. DLL, dynamic link library. So DLLs are, um, you can think of them as like files that contain small like databases or rather libraries of information for an application to use. A DLL can, uh, there can be multiple of them for one application. Uh, it's definitely something that is important for a lot of apps. Um, DLLs can be hacked as well, like they can be altered, corrupted. So you always got to make sure that uh, those files are also validated, um, and corruption is checked for. DLP, data loss prevention. So data loss prevention can be done in multiple ways, over the network, on physical devices. Essentially, the idea of not losing data, keeping data in multiple places, the 3-2-1 rule, right? Um, keep data in three different places, on premise, in the cloud, and then maybe in a cold storage, um, or it's actively being used, right? Or something like that, right? Um, you're archiving the data, you're using the data, and then you got the data in the cloud, or you got the data on your physical devices, you got it on the network, and then you got it in the cloud, right? Uh, DMARC, uh, domain message authentication, reporting, and conformance. So DMARC I've heard about. Can't think of a good example though. on this one. I think this might be a handshake for domain authentication, but I'm probably wrong there. Um, okay, let's see here. DNAT, destination network address transaction. DNAT, don't see too often on in the Sec Plus questions. Um, it's a term that seems like something that would uh, keep a transaction of where a network address, where a destination has been hit on a network address. Um, something that I would want to read up on as well. DNS, domain name system. Um, for some reason, I was going to say domain name server, but uh, I think I've heard of DNS meaning that, but maybe I just had that backwards. But domain name system is the idea of where websites and IP addresses kind of connect. So, like Google.com is a domain, right? And you connect to it, right? But really, you're connecting to a giant farm of servers that are all just kind of pointing to the same domain name, right? So, domain names or domain name system is the idea uh, um, of turning an address into something that's human readable, right? Instead of typing in an IP address, you type in a domain name, right? So that's the idea here. DNSSEC, well, the security for the the domain name system, essentially a set of um, se- se- security uh, security settings um, for purposes like keeping a keeping the DNS records uh, private. Excuse me. Um, um, yeah, it doesn't stop someone from finding out the DNS lookup information. It's more of like there's ways to go about making it private, but DNSSEC it's like protecting that domain from stuff like DNS poisoning or spoofing or manipulation or DNS like manipulating, right? Um, trying to forward that domain to a different endpoint uh, or creating a domain with a unique character that looks exactly like the same domain, but really it isn't, right? And then a typo, uh, something like typo squatting, right, would lead you to believe that you're on the right page, but really you're not. You're on a malicious page. A DOS, a denial of service. So a denial of service is when you try to actively hit an endpoint and um, try to take that service offline. Essentially, you are trying to remove or rather deny any access to that particular service. Um, a DOS is something that's heavily used in the security realm to try to take down services, um, flood uh, flood your web page with connections, and then overload your servers. There is a distributed denial of service, where you have essentially a giant farm of connections. Usually, some of these lead towards having like botnets set up, or rather, a, a large farm of machines that would try to essentially take a service down. Um, DPO, Data Protection Officer. Um, um, so DPO is usually um, are you the best example I can think of is um, the like GDPR uh, standard, where um, you have you have someone that you have someone that ensures your data there's transparency in what your data is going, your personal data, um, and a DPL is like a delegate that ensures that is happening, right? Uh, um, so yeah, I think DPOs uh, are heavily used in like GDPR for data protection and data transparency in the EU. DRP, disaster recovery plan. So the the definition of it uh, kind of gives the indication here. I in the IT space, I'll be honest, I never heard someone say DRP. DR is thrown around every now and then, but um, usually they'll say the full term if for clarity and documentation. Um, Being concise is nice, but something like this, I think, would there'd be a a document that's relatively long, uh, created for something like this. But disaster recovery plan is in the name. When a disaster happens, what do you do to get your systems back up and running? For example, production is down. Do you have a different site you can connect to that is available, where you can forward all your traffic to? Right, so your customers don't see anything, didn't see anything happen in regards to your systems going down or your services going down. Your uptime stayed at 99%, or whatever SLAs you agreed to, between you and your customers. And yeah, it's extremely crucial for an organization to have a disaster recovery plan, um, because disaster can strike at any time. DSA, digital signature algorithm. Um, so digital signatures are used to essentially ensure um, um, that an entity is like valid. But digital signatures are something that I think are used heavily in the federal sector. Um, um, the algorithm here, I think, kind of leads towards something more mathematical, kind of like kind of like the process of how a digital signature works. Um, um, yeah, but digital signatures are essentially used to uh, verify that this is a legitimate source. If that makes sense. And then this just kind of is like the the mathematical use of it, right? The idea of um, key generation, and um, how that key is then creates a private and public key, and you could use that to basically uh, authenticate who is who and keep integrity of messages. Um, so yeah, DSA. So DSL, digital subscriber line. Haven't seen this one very often in the questions. Um, I'll have to read up on that one. I think it has something to do with subscriber. Nothing related to YouTube, but uh, yeah. Let's move on to the next one. EAP, um, extensible authentication protocol. So I have seen this one a couple times in the questions. I don't exactly remember how it was used, so I'll have to come back to that one. ECP, or the electronic codebook, um, maybe used in the IEEE sector. Um, could be wrong there. ECC, elliptic, elect, uh, elliptic curve cryptography. So this is a cryptographic way that is popular in the mobile space. ECC is used to um, um, ECC is used in this scenario, or is used in mobile devices to enable cryptography. That's the best explanation I got. It's a very popular form of cryptography in the mobile space. ECDHE, elliptic curve, Diffie-Hellman, ephemeral. And then we got ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. So I'll have to do a little bit more reading on these and how they're different from the original ECC. But yeah, EDR, endpoint detection and response. The name kind of gives it away. Um, what, how do you detect incidences and respond to them in a effective manner? Um, Policies are created for this and technical documents that are pretty extensive. Uh, EDR is a huge uh, thing in a business when it comes to handling incidences or attacks. EFS, encrypted file system. Um, so a file system being a directory and like a drive, right? On your system, and then that being encrypted via uh, um, trying to remember the tool, uh, BitLocker. Yes, yeah. So BitLocker is a tool that will encrypt your drive in the event that it's lost or stolen, so that your data is not uh, plain text and available to anyone who just will take out the drive and you know try to read off it. EIP, extended instruction pointer. Don't got a good example for that one. I'll have to move on and see. EOL, end of life. So this is used whenever you're buying licenses from a vendor. That vendor then gives you pieces of software, and that software has uh, a shelf life, basically the amount of time that it will be supported. And end of life usually means that product is done. EOL also can be for hardware. Uh, so like Windows Server 2016, uh, or sorry, the Dell uh, the Dell servers that are in like big data centers. Those can go EOL. Um, Windows Server 2016 has gone EOL. Um, um, at least I think so. I don't think there was an extended shelf life on it. EOS is the one prior to an EOL, so you can think of it as end of support, but in this case, it's end of service, essentially saying that there's no more support or servicing on that specific application or product because it is no longer uh, uh, supported by the vendor, or in this case, it could be your corporation or the hardware vendor. Um, yeah. Products hit end of support or end of service almost all the time. It's very frequent. Every 3 4 years, you'll have to replace update software, replace hardware in order to remain in support. And sometimes it is kind of a price gouge from a vendor standpoint, but it's the business. It's the business of vendor support. ERP, enterprise resource planning. Um, yeah, so ERP is more on the administrative side. Um, ERPs can get quite extensive in regards to the type of software that they are. Um, yeah, but they usually kind of are an all-encompassing management platform for the entire business, right? Basically, kind of gauging where resources are needed and where the company should put money. Um, it's a pretty big management platform for streamlining the organization's policies and processes. ESN, electronic serial number. Um, yeah, then the name kind of says it. It's a serial number that's electronic on a device. Um, ESP encapsulating security payload. I believe this is a Metasploit. Metasploit can be related to Metasploit here. ESPs. I mean, payloads are something that are are used in attacks, right? When you're trying to uh, exploit a certain system. Um, don't have a good definition for that one though. SSID again, but this time is extended. Could just be a longer form SSID. Would have to see what the extended portion means. Uh, FACL or ACL file system access control, an access control system for file systems, right? Or you know, who can access what in this directory, essentially. FDE, full disk encryption, right? BitLocker can enable that for drives. It's an example product. So I think what we'll do is we'll stop there. I'll stop at FDE. There's definitely a lot more. We're only on page two. Um, there's so much more acronyms. You can definitely tell we'll probably be on this for another 2 3 days, or 2 3 streams, right? Um, but yeah, we'll do our best. So we'll stop at FDE today and then continue tomorrow. Uh, See how far we get in the next couple of streams. Hopefully, we get through all of them, and then we'll jump back into the questions to see re- if we recall any of these or remember them. So yeah, have a good day, guys.